But the big secret for any early stage father is you pass on who you are more than what you know.
I want to jump straight into the conversation, if you don't mind, because I know you've got a passion for fatherhood in general, right? So I want to talk, because as you know, I just became a grandfather. Yes, I know that the hair's slicked back and all that kind of stuff, but I'm a grandfather for the second time.
Yeah.
Brand new baby girl, right? Haley Jade. And I want to better understand and set up the father that I'm now raising to be a father for success.
Yeah.
Where do we most go wrong as fatherhood, or as fathers, as we're kind of come out the gate?
Yeah. So I think that where we most go wrong is we kind of we look for tips and tricks to try to improve our fatherhood, like, how to deal with the stinky diaper, or how to deal with, early stage fatherhood and maybe the impact on the marriage or whatever. And we're looking for hacks and tricks. But the big secret for any early stage father is you pass on who you are more than what you know. And so number one thing
say that again.
You pass on who you are more than what you know. So while young fathers are looking for tips and tricks, all the while there may be things that are unresolved in their soul that ultimately they will be passing on if they don't deal with it, overcome it, and be victorious over it. And hacks don't get it done. And so it's a little bit counterintuitive. I use the airplane analogy: put the mask on yourself first and then help the other. So I think there's it's just so important for young fathers to understand you're going to pass on who you are. Yeah. You don't want who you are. If you know that you can be better, if you know there's areas that you need to overcome, then that is what you need to work on, because you will pass that on.
Yeah.
And so that's the big one for young fathers.
Yeah, I think it was Dan. It might have been Dan. No, it's Truett Kathy. That said, let me get them so I can get this right. It's better to build men than to mend them.
Yes.
And as growing up like I did, and again, I want to be very, very cautious with how I say these words. My father was struggling with a lot of life dysfunction in his own life early on. Therefore, he instructed a lot of dysfunction. You talked about it just a second ago. But he's now an amazing grandfather and he's a great dad. Okay, at this stage in the game. So I wanted people to understand, if you're struggling as a father, you could be doing more and better, give yourself some grace. You got time, right? Yeah. The second thing though that I would say to that is, one of the conversations I had with him is like, he's like, well, who taught you to be a dad?
Right.
Who taught you to what to do when you're sitting in the chair for the first time and you're talking about the birds and the bees, or you're getting ready to talk about the first heartbreak, or the first time, hair shows up on your body, or, all these different things. And of course it varies with, you got daughters and sons, right? So you got the best of both worlds, right? So, I mean, talk to us a little bit about the importance of understanding where fatherhood is shaped so we can better understand how to position it to make sure we're shaping great men.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things is that men in general, here's my take on men. Men in general like to do it themselves. They fall in love with Google and YouTube because, hey, I don't have to be embarrassed, right? I can ask the questions I need to get answered for, and nobody needs to know. But the nasty little secret about all that is there's no relational aspect, and it's not customized for you. So you know you might gain some general understanding of something, but the power is your story and what you need to learn. And so the way that men grow usually is in mentoring relationships. And these are going to be relationships where other men have walked ahead of you. They're committed to you in a relationship. They're like, hey, we want to pass on the things that we've come to know and have put into practice. And so really what I would encourage any man who knows that they have a deficit, start looking for those that can help walk in relationship with you to help you with that fatherhood journey. And there's many men's ministries and others that kind of create these kind of community environments for men so that they can get these hard questions answered. And they don't have to be just looking for general knowledge on YouTube or Google.
Yeah, like I said, I love the first comment you made about, you're going to pour into people more of who you are than what you know. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you ever heard this growing up. I know I did. was like, do what I say, not as I do.
Yeah, of course.
Like, and stuff like that. And I just, it's not until you get older and you become in theory, become a mature adult, right? Because we're always maturing, but it's not until you get older that you realize that some of these statements almost become like life lies.
Yeah.
Because you feel like because it was said to you, you could turn right around and say it to someone else, maybe your own kids, right? And my audience doesn't. I'm going to share this for the first time. They don't know this because they've heard me talk about my kids before. And I got great kids. I got 2 boys and a daughter, but none of them are biologically mine, right? I biologically can't have children, and that's been that way for some time. And so by the time I was actually ready to quote unquote have children and get into that realm,
Right.
for me it was more like a gift. And I was able to always position myself and look at it as the gift that it really is. Has looking at your fatherhood, whether you've done it right or wrong or perfect, have you always been able to look at it through the lens of a gift, or how could looking at it through that lens kind of be like a really pivotal thing for a man?
Yeah. So gifts come in different shapes and sizes.
Okay.
And I would say that I looked at it as I was afraid to be a dad. I was afraid what I would pass on as a dad. But the gift that children were to me as a man was, I remember the day my second son was born, and I remember thinking, I have so much to learn about what it is to be a man and to pass on masculine truths to my second son. It was such a kind of a sobering call of like, I need to get serious about this. Like, I can't just drift through life and just kind of, halfway do it, because that's what I'm going to pass on. I really got to get serious about my own personal growth.
Yeah.
Maturity, really, I think is a lot of it was maturity. And the thing that I love about what you do is you're really helping shore up these areas of people's lives that just have gaps. And, nobody's, we don't choose the family we're born in. Sometimes we grow up and we're going to have gaps, but it's our responsibility what we do with those gaps. And it's absolutely our responsibility if we choose, and I would say choose, to pass on those gaps, because we never took it.
That's so good. I think it's one of the reasons I love the book and the name of the book, right? Fatherhood Faceplants. Because I think you almost give us all like enough love and grace to actually admit the fact that we're going to have faceplants as fathers. I have had several through my best efforts of even trying to do it the right way the first time. So let's talk about some of the fatherhood faceplants that you have, so we can maybe help the audience understand some of your own. What are ones that became like pillar cornerstone moments for yourself that you would share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the things that I have really learned, and this is a little bit maybe not what you would expect as this answer, but being a good husband, right? Learning about loving my wife, being committed to my wife, being gracious to my wife, to overcome any sort of hang-ups that I had in how I interacted. All that communication and gracious interaction and being loving and being patient, and all of that translates into healthy relationships. And so for my kids, it was a little bit like, my kids think, oh, wow, you're a great dad, right? And they're young, especially when they're young, they think you're great. They're all excited to see
you're Superman. You actually have a cloak and a cape under your,
Exactly. But the wife relationship can sometimes be the one that's more truest to like who you are and your warts and your flaws and etc. And so the story of kind of what's I kind of play out in the book is the cornerstone lesson that I was able to understand and learn was, I can't just be a good dad and not be a good husband.
Yeah.
It actually starts with being a good husband. I'll tell you this quick story because it's such a powerful story.
Yeah.
That my wife and I went through a difficult season where we ended up splitting up, but we ended up getting back together. But during that difficult season, there was an older man and an older couple, and I went to a church meeting, and he came with this 1968 or 1972 plaque that said, the best thing a man can do for his children is love his wife. And it was this old school, looked like a Willy Wonka ticket. It was the weirdest looking wooden plaque. And he came to this men's meeting, And I basically in this meeting kind of revealed, hey, we're hitting a really rough spot. And he stood up and said, my wife, we've had this thing for 30 years. And my wife said, I think that somebody needs this today. And when
Mm.
you share that you and your wife were hitting a rough spot, I want to hand this to you. Now, this was a
Wow.
treasure in their marriage that
Wow.
they had kept for 30 years, and they're handing it to a man who looked like he was going to get divorced. It wasn't looking hopeful. It wasn't
Yeah.
looking good. Yeah. And it was such the grace of God. And it really nailed home that lesson. Look, learn how to be a good husband, and you will teach your children healthy relational skills and what a healthy, loving, gracious, patient relationship looks like, if you have difficulties or not.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. But I also think there's a pillar point of that comes from that. And for me, even, being a husband, being a father, all that kind of stuff, for me, the most difficult thing to show is a healthy state of masculinity. Because either you're overly masculine and you're constricting and dominant, or you're
Yes.
underly masculine and you're, you bar none have feminine traits and stuff like that. As a father and a husband, it just seems like it's so weird to try to find this balance. So when you think about masculinity, what is a healthy masculinity?
Oh gosh. I mean, I know have faith listeners, and I certainly do with my podcast. And I'm telling you, Jesus is the perfect balance.
Okay.
When I look at his life balance, you've got the intensity and the confrontational, which I would say is very masculine, right? Flipping tables, articulating arguments with the best of the lawyers of the days, trying to not getting caught in corners, and really being what I would consider aggressive.
Yeah.
And then you've got these traits of him very tender. Of the death of Lazarus and how he handled, the women and their grieving, and they were so tender, even to the point where he's moved by emotion. And that was all masculine, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that he was a man, right? And he
Yeah.
had this full range of emotions and tenderness and intensity. And I think that, he gets shortchanged. I would say that the way that he gets shortchanged in general is that he's overly feminine and overly soft. But if you really study what he did and how he interacted with people, he had a very aggressive, direct, not abrasive, but very make a lot of people uncomfortable, and that's
he had his moments, that's for sure.
you need both. And so that would be one way that I would kind of frame masculinity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, the younger the boys were, typically the more empathy and tenderness I showed.
Yeah.
As they began to age, I began to say, okay, they're coming out of this really young boyhood where they need nurturing, they need connection, they need affirmation, they need empowerment, they need inspiration. And as they began to kind of grow up, it became, okay, well, now we need correction. Now we need to make sure that the behaviors that you're lining up with are consistent with the values that you have as an individual, and as a person of faith, values that I share as well.
Yeah.
Ultimately leading them to make their own decision as they grew up. And I've been very fortunate that they also found faith the same way I did. Well, not the same way, but the same faith I did. And the older years, now that, I think one is going to be 21 very soon. The other's going to be 20 very soon. Essentially, they're technically men, at least by the law standards. Yeah. And now they get a lot more face-to-face masculinity style talks. It's a lot more man-to-man kind of communication. Not that I'm being domineering or I'm being hurtful, but more along the lines of I'm being more like a mentor. I kind of moved from that role of the compassionate person up to more of the role of the mentor in their lives, knowing that they've got to make their own decisions and make their own mistakes. Have you found that that's been something like that's been a good framework to basically, create a solid fatherhood role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that laid it out beautifully. And the other piece I will add is that one of the powerful things that fathers can do, and mothers maybe can do them, but I've seen mothers maybe be a little bit tougher on this one. It's more of a challenge for them, is put your children in very challenging situations and uncomfortable situations for their growth, and so that they can own victory, overcoming, owning something that they are proud of that they did and accomplished.
Yeah.
Sometimes when they are struggling and really seeking a rescue, right? That's where sometimes I can pull on those mom strings pretty hard and say, you know, what can we do to kind of help them out? I'm not saying all moms are like this or all dads are like this, but I'm just kind of painting a general picture. Is that, you know, it's like you want to rescue them or you want to help them. But the fact is they have to, just like you did and I did, have to struggle through things to be able to own the victories on the other side, knowing that, you know what, my dad was there to support me, to mentor me, to encourage me, but he never removed the flame, and he just, you can do it, you can get through this. And when they do, they own it, they grow as what they're really called to be as a man, or even daughters can kind of go through this situation. But I think it's a unique role as a dad to kind of put that pressure in a loving way, but in a supportive way. Like, you can do this, but I'm not going to remove the situation just so it's all of a sudden easy, like,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it seems like to me that, you know, when it comes to the children and as a whole, like I treat my daughter a little bit differently than I treat my boys, but it's the same expectation, right? Same principles apply. I might communicate to her a little bit differently than I would communicate to the boys. I want to pivot a little bit to the fathers that maybe who were like my dad was growing up, right? Who didn't get it right the first time. I mean, when I say they didn't get it right, I mean that they weren't around, or they had some kind of vice or something they were dealing with for a number of years before they could kind of get themselves together, and now want to be around and now want to, you know, play a role and or become part of maybe their children's lives, even though they've been distant and kind of estranged from them. What advice are we going to give to them today?
Two things I'll give them advice: be brave, and it's never too late.
Mm.
And here's why. I had a father like that, and I remember the day. I was 27 years old. I had been married. I was newly married, and he was feeling those feelings of kind of regret and distance, and I kind of messed up, and he wanted to make it right. And I remember we were in this situation where we were at a men's meeting, and they kind of said, "Hey, dads, why don't you go hug your sons?" You know. And I'm a 27-year-old man, right? I'm married. I live across the country. I got my own things. And I remember that boy heart in me, even at 27, wanted so badly to get a massive hug from my dad, because I was tired and I was weary of trying to figure everything out on my own, because he had been mostly absent. And when it came time to hug me, he couldn't do it. He was so filled with regret and hesitation because of his own mistakes. He really could not just get out of himself, be brave, embrace me, say, "I love you." And that's absolutely what I needed at the time. Now, that might not sound like a great story, but it is a great story, because what I'm telling you is, for those fathers out there, your son and your daughter, they always need you. Always. Yeah. But you have to be brave enough and to say, you know what? I've made mistakes, but I'm going to step into this moment and be your dad and love you the best I can right now. And I guarantee you that it may not happen the first time, but it will eventually happen with your children. Yeah. Will say, "Thank you so much. I needed that so bad." And that's so much of this book is about. It's a getting back up story, right? The tagline is how to get back up and be the kid be the dad your kids need. And it's because so much we're going to make mistakes. It's not about that. It's about getting up, learning how to fight, engaging, and then actually becoming an engaged parent, irrespective of how bad it was or how bad it's been. Yeah. That's the hope that I lay out in this book, is that's possible. And I'm telling you, your children are waiting for it.
Yeah. Well, let me talk a little about expectations, because I know at least for me, what held my father back for a number of years was just what you just mentioned, guilt and shame.
Sure.
Like, just completely, I messed it up too bad. I'm too far gone. I can never make it up. He had a moment where he discovered his faith along the process. My brother and I were there with him, which was kind of a magical moment for our family specifically. But more importantly, after that, as children, we didn't really know what to think. Like we weren't really sure, is dad serious? Is he not serious? And, you know, so he would make great strides and he would have like a little like stumble, right? And he would make great strides and he would stumble. And I think what finally gave us peace to like, we're publicly talk about how great of a dad he is now, right? When in our childhood, we wouldn't have said that, right? Is this element of consistency. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because I know in both of our stories, fatherhood played a role in our lives, meaning we didn't have great fathers growing up. We had fathers that wanted to reconnect and we wanted to be great. We wanted to be great fathers. We shared all of those in common.
Yeah.
More importantly, there's also this piece of wanting to understand how to actually overcome guilt and shame in the first place. So if we were actually talking to our dads right now, right, and we're talking to them a decade ago, and we're trying to shake them out of that so they can actually live a life of purpose and meaning and fulfillment, what are we going to tell them?
Wow, that's a big question. You mentioned that your dad came to faith. My dad came to faith, but he struggled with the belief in forgiveness. And I think the thing that is the most powerful truth to set men free from being disengaged, passive, guilt-ridden fathers to being engaged, active, free fathers is forgiveness.
Yeah.
And being able to truly understand that forgiveness looks like an action. Right? Forgiveness, if you are truly forgiven, if you've received forgiveness from God, then your action should not look like a guilt-ridden, beat dog. Right? It should look like someone that is confident, that actually has faith that they are free and they can be different and are different. And and so what I would have told him, and it was very interesting because I kind of transitioned from needing something from him for many years to saying, you know what, I set you free. Like God has been like a father to me, and I've had other mentors in my life, and I just love you and I want to understand you, and I'm not looking for anything from you anymore. I just want to be close to you.
Yeah.
And that really changed the dynamic with he and I. And I would have told him at that time, is like, you're forgiven. Like, I do not hold anything against you. I just asked for involvement.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, dad guilt's a real thing. And but I'm an absolutely living testimony. You can live free from it.
Yeah.
Completely. Even if you read my book, you know how bad it got.
Yeah.
But I'm completely free from that. I don't even live from that place anymore.
We know, I'm glad you mentioned the book again. You know, there's so many profound things in the book, understandings, applicable principles.
Yeah.
When you're looking at it, I'm a big, all right. So you and I are, obviously we're both authors. So we both write books that we hope will impact the world. And I don't know about you, but I've picked up a couple of manuscripts before, and I'm starting to typing. I'm like, this just feels off. Right. And then 6 months might go by and I might do it again. Okay. Well, that's not great. This feels off. And then there's these other things that while they're fine tuned along the way, they become like almost like passion projects. And I believe that certain books call you to write them. What called you to write this book? Because it reads like a book that you were called to write, not a book that you wrote just as an author.
No, that's a very accurate description. So many years ago, when I was a young dad, I had a lot of mentors and people in my life that started to say things about me becoming a dad. And me learning about being a dad as being a mission or a calling. And I always was kind of like, okay, is that a calling? Or like, I want to be something else. Like, I'm already a dad.
I want to do something else.
And so, and it was kind of like that, but it kept over and over again. And then I would go to scripture, and God started teaching me all these things about the ways generations play off of each other and feed off each other, good or bad.
Yeah.
And I just kept getting insight into it. And this phrase came up that basically said, where I came to understand that I believe that through me, that fatherless sons will become good fathers for generations to come. And what I mean by that is
Amen.
don't have a clue
Mm-hmm.
that happen to be dads,
Yeah.
that maybe are starting from ground zero, that they can become not only the best fathers for their generation, but they can start to raise, generations of good fathers and
Yeah.
generations of good kids, and in all the cycle of craziness. And I know you resonate with this so well. The cycle of dysfunction, the cycle of sort of patterns of failure, all of that can stop in one generation. But it
Mm-hmm.
takes somebody that says enough's enough. Where do I need to go to do the hard work, and do the hard work? And then you can change your entire lineage for
Yeah. Oh, and I think that's important, because I think that's what you get. This is definitely a book that I think every father should read, regardless of what stage of fatherhood you're in, because I find that the closer you are to your fatherhood style, the more blinded you are to your fatherhood style.
Yeah, that's
Right. You're so used to doing things a specific way, and you're convinced yourself that you're doing everything the right way. And I think sometimes having stories that illustrate more painful things that can come out of just kind of not paying attention, or not having dads. We take it all the way back to the Bible, right? So there's a in the world that we live in, two of the largest religions that we have on the planet are Christianity and Islam.
Yeah.
Okay. What most people don't fully understand is both of those religions can be traced all the way back to Abraham. Ishmael later becomes the area of Islam, where Isaac later becomes Judaism and then into Christianity. And it just goes to show that without a father's love, without a father's commitment, that things can get very strange, very wrong in a very quick fashion. You look at the world population right now, the vast majority of fatherhood issues as it relates to poverty is directly coming from many of the households being more about conquest rather than actually having a family. And when you do have a family, stepping up as a father, because I feel like in some cases we are sold a bad bill of goods when we're sold, hey, look, just go out and do it your way, and whatever happens, happens. And then you actually have a child that's born. And then all of a sudden you have to face, and I think this happens a lot with men, especially in this circumstance, a lot of fear.
Yep.
A lot of, oh my God, my life is over. What have I done? Okay, I'll just ignore it.
Yep.
Right. And then we end up with that fatherless generation all over again. When it comes down to it, let's talk to the young man who just found out he's a father, but he didn't really think he was ready to be a father. What are we going to tell him?
You're called. That's the miracle of life. Like the fact that a child can be born. A lot of times we I messed up, or I'm not ready, or that. You know what? I believe in a God that's sovereign over the universe, and he picked you to be a dad. That means you are called. That means he believes it's possible. That means whatever he has planned, if you will go with his plan, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
But it will require everything from you from a standpoint of growth.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, I'm telling you, we've been around, if you've been around the party scene and all this stuff, the people that get stuck in a rut, they're still drinking, still doing the same drugs, still chasing the same women, and they're much, much older than they used to be when they were in their teen years.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of like, oh, that's sad. Well, you know what? That's just a man that didn't want to change.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't want to grow, that didn't want to expand his world into something more impactful and meaningful and purposeful, because maybe out of fear. And when you become a dad, that's that crossroads that says game on.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I mean, because a lot of, there's an old saying, and granted, I've heard it like 85 different places, so I can't really quote where it came from. But hurt people, meaning, you've got people who are wounded themselves spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, tend to do the same thing to other people. And some of my experiences has been that people want to change, but don't necessarily have the courage to change because they think they can't change, one. And two, is because they're still licking their wounds from being a child themselves.
Yep.
Are you seeing a lot in that with your work as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's where I kind of get into the responsibility model. where I'm saying, guys, that's on you, right? Like, let's get some help. Take some
So
ownership.
the choice is to recognize it, right? So I mean, from what I hear, I just want to make sure that the dads that, because I think their dads are going to be watching this, that we're basically where our fathers were, right? And they need to make a decision now.
Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, while all the adversity that you faced as a child was true, right, and you had some wounds and some other stuff like that, you have the choice about whether or not you want to stay there. Is that right?
I absolutely had a choice. And the thing that I want to emphasize is it's not a trivial choice. It is a major choice. Like, like this is how I've dealt with this is the way I've dealt with life.
Yeah.
Putting that on the table and saying, I'm willing to deal with life differently. I'm willing to think differently, view myself differently, view my circumstances differently. Like, I'm willing to be transformed. And that's really the courage that I'm calling men to, is that when you get to that when you get a child, it's such an amazing opportunity to say, you know what, I don't know what to do, but I know that I need to do something. Where can I get started? Right?
Yeah.
They can start with you. They can start with podcasts. They can start with books.
Yeah.
Eventually, I'm going to encourage them to start finding people that are modeling something that you admire, that you think is healthy, and that you don't have, and be the courageous one that says, hey, would you get a beer or get a coffee or do something?
Yeah.
We spend a little bit of time. I just have a few questions and try to forge relationships.
And the crazy part is, like, you and I got to know each other over a couple of relationships, like just and became fast friends and now brothers, I would say. But as we're looking into the future, and we're talking to an audience, right? They already know they need to go get Fatherhood Faceplants. That's a done deal, especially if you're going to be a father, right? I'm going to get it for Connor. In fact, my copy is going to Connor, who's is the father of my new grandbaby. And I want to make sure that he is doing the best he can as a father. I know that's what he wants, but I also know that part of being a good dad is choosing to respond rather than reacting. Right. So what are some of the traits from your perspective, right? What are some of the traits of a quality father, or, the attributes of a quality father? What kind of character traits do they have?
Yeah. So I would say one of the traits is that they listen more than they speak. In the sense that the best soldiers are situationally aware, and they engage when it's time to engage. A lot of times that people are like the lectured dads. They're not even aware of the circumstance. They just have a lecture for it. So they're not listening, but they're speaking, and they're not being heard. So the best way to be heard and add value is to listen. Listen to your children, listen to your wife, listen to what's going on, and then respond in a thoughtful way. So that would be one characteristic. I would say another characteristic is be tenaciously vigilant in your own personal growth. In the sense that if you know that you have and I've kind of felt like I've banged this drum on this, but it's so important. If you know you have areas to shore up in your life, private areas, public areas, whatever, then do what it takes to become better in those areas. If it's counseling, go to counseling. If it's relationships, go to relationships. If it's podcasts, if it's books, if it's this, if it's that, because I'm telling you, you will pass on who you are, and you want to be the best version. You want to learn how to overcome things that maybe you don't know how to overcome now, but then you will learn. And then that becomes an incredible resource to your children that says, oh, thank you for helping guide me to overcome certain things, or to, deal with anxiety or insecurity or fears or whatever. And so that would be another trait that I say is just so key. And then I would say the last thing is have a vision. All your children were given to you by God. They're uniquely made. They have a unique bent about how God has created them, and ask ask God for that kind of vision for your children. Like, God, how do you see them? What are they like? And then be able to be that voice in their life that is always speaking that vision over their life. you are uniquely made this way. You are uniquely gifted this way. It doesn't mean that you're going to do this job or do this thing. I don't, vision is broader. It's like the impact that you're going to have on the world and on other people. And being able to have a vision like that for your children and then just continually speak over it. And I can guarantee you they will not always live up to it, but if you're always speaking it, they will come to believe that's actually the truest thing about them.
I love it, dude. I love it. Man, I always did love hanging out with you and have such a great conversation. Where can the audience find out more about you, Holmes?
Yeah, so the best way to find out more about me is at troymangum.com. It's Mangum, and they can find my podcast there. I run a podcast called the Kindling Fire. They can find about some young men initiatives I'm running there, and they can find more information about the book.
Dude, I love it, man. Man, again, I love it, man. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Steven, it's been so great, man. I miss you. I'm glad we got to hang out again.
I know. We've got to do this in person next time.
I know, totally.
All right, dude. Take it easy. See ya. If you love that interview, go ahead and check out this next one right here.
No matter how absurd a thought is, if I think it enough, I will believe it. And we now know that those thoughts turn into actions. And so these absurdities in our head become reality.